is the 19th of January 2024. And I'm Navpreet. I'm the moderator for the British News Analysis hosted by Lokmedia. We've got Savinder Dillo, who is part of the Indian Workers Association, and Steve Hedley, who is the chair of the Newham Trade Council. So in our last meeting that we held, we mentioned that Steve has a book launch on the 29th of January, Bookmarks Bookshop in London. As I was ordering my ticket, Savinder, I noticed that the event description mentioned that the right-wing media has described Steve as the most dangerous man in Britain. So, Steve, what socialist views have you expressed that make them believe that you're so dangerous? And I'm assuming it's about working class empowerment, and is that something to be scared of?
That what they expect when you go on there and you represent the trade union is that you go on apologising for workers and apologising for taking strike action. And I made a point not to do that, or if I did, I would say I'm sorry, we've inconvenienced the public, but we've got every right to strike, we've got every right to take action. And occasionally they would say, you want to overthrow the government, don't you? And I would say, yeah, well, personally I would, but probably the workers wouldn't. Most of the people that we represent wouldn't, but that would be my personal view. And I've always made it quite apparent that we weren't just against a particular boss at a particular time, but we were against the whole capitalist system whenever I had the opportunity, whenever that was an appropriate thing to say. And I think they couldn't take it actually, because they weren't expecting that line of an answer. They were expecting some bureaucrat to roll over and start apologising and begging for a few more pence. And I think when it came to it, that's why if you do get trade union people who are elected into leadership positions and they are uncompromising and they do see that we're in a class struggle and are prepared to fight that class struggle, our enemies quickly pick those people out, and our enemies in the trade union movement align with them to try to get them removed.
It's interesting for them to refer you as the most dangerous man, though, based on just what you've said, even though clearly you're representing the workers in the trade union movement. So for you to say a lot of them don't want to overthrow the government it doesn't seem like much of a threat to me. You've lived through the troubles in Ireland, and in your book you talk about the memories of hunger strikes, the poll tax, and participatory militant anti-fascism and trade unionism, which led to for you to be the elected to second in command of the RMT union. So with your experience in the trade union movement, you've obviously have some gems of knowledge to be shared with us. And we're going to briefly discuss some of the key learnings that you have in your book. So before we go further into the book and the key learnings, I'd like to ask you, Steve and Savinder, why trade unions are so important to you, and what potential do trade unions have, and what can they achieve?
Well, to me, trade unions are just basic defense organizations of the working class. They're what make a lot of people's lives bearable. If it wasn't for trade unions, we probably wouldn't have holidays, we wouldn't have at least minimum wages, and people would be in absolute destitution and poverty. And I think that the kind of trade union I want, which is a revolutionary trade union, which knows that the essential battle in society is an economic one between the working class and the capitalist class, is not really the kind of union that exists in Britain in a large scale. What we have is completely yellow unions. The unions that we have are completely compromised, and I think that the state actually controls a lot of people in those unions. And I say that because there's a long history of MI5 and other security services infiltrating trade unions and at least having contacts in trade unions to guide things this way and that way. And Arthur Scargill famously said, somebody said to Arthur Scargill, do you know that the Trade Union Congress, the committee on that had at least 50% spies? And Arthur said, well, that does surprise me. He said, I thought it was a lot more. So that's something that goes back in generations. And I think that if you look at the spy cop scenario where they had coppers infiltrating tiny left-wing groups or sects, really, and impregnating women and going into false relationships with women, adopting the identities of dead children. If they're prepared to do that with little powerless sects, what are they going to do to unions that can literally stop the country or slow the country right down, like a transport union like the RMT? And I honestly believe, and people can call me a conspiracy theorist that they like, but I honestly believe that our movement is riddled with people who are actually complete pillars of capitalism. And I think we've got to change that. If we want justice for workers in any way at all, we have got to change the structures of trade unions.
Window?
Yeah, from my experience in Britain and other countries, I find that the trade unions do play a very positive role under the pressure of the demands of the working class for the economic and political struggles, but their leadership is usually trying to confine those struggles within the limitations of serving the capitalist interests. Therefore, the deals they end up with are usually far below what the workers have always wanted, like they're not keeping up to the inflation rate. So economically, the capitalists mostly win, and if they do give wages, then the prices go up and the workers are back into square one. So there's an unholy alliance, I call it, between sections of the various sections of trade union leadership, not all, but quite a lot. As Steve mentioned, there's a lot of that going on. And what they do is they are like watering down, hosing down the militant struggle of the working class, whether it'll be in Britain, whether it be in Australia or India or anywhere in the world. The capitalist system relies on the trade union movement, leadership, aristocracy, and on the Labour Party in Britain and similar so-called working class parties in other countries as well, working together, to safeguard the interest of the capitalist system. And Steve mentioned about he would very much like to have the system change, but the trade union movements can only work within the limitations of their mandate and, of course, needs of the membership. But overall, they within the framework of capitalism, they can still play a strong militant role, both on the economic struggles and the political struggles, such as the anti-worker legislations. They should be fighting for that. They should be fighting against war. They should be fighting against privatizations, serving the interests of working people for peace and security, and not the interests of the capitalists. And that's the transformation we would like to make. And this is where Steve, they're afraid of people like Steve, because he's been very militant. He's been wanting to fight loyally for the working class interest. And that's what the capitalists do not like.
From what I'm getting from your conversation, like your responses now, trade unions have a lot of power if they were to work well. And obviously people in power can see that they have a lot of power because obviously there's more power to the people. So they'll do anything to knock that down. So we'll go on. Steve, you covered this in your book, but could you briefly summarize why you're advocating for a return to class politics, particularly tied to environmental and global socialist goals? Is the working class struggle against the middle class or the bourgeoisie?
Well, the working class struggle should be against the capitalist class. It should be against the capitalists. And I think what we've had in the past 10 years or so is an absolute stampede in the identity politics. I think if we look what unites us as working class people is our economic condition, our economic exploitation under capitalism. And of course, women are more oppressed under capitalism than men. Black people are more oppressed than white people. Black women are more oppressed than black men, and people with who are homosexuals are oppressed as well, and transgender and all the rest of it. I accept that, right? But if we start off from the premise that we're all kind of individuals or we're all part of an identity, and that's not the working class, then it's very, very easy to divide us. It's very easy to set off one section of the working class against each other. And I work in education now, and my theory of education is we educate ourselves to rise with our class and not out of our class. And the identity politics, most of it is about people rising out of their class, people doing well. And of course, capitalism can let certain people do well. They can let people from any minority do well, but they can't let everybody from any minority do well. They can't let the whole working class do well, because that will actually upset and overthrow the system. So I think we need to return to class politics ASAP. Now, why I tie it to environmentalism is that the working class will suffer the most from the coming catastrophe. We are going to have a catastrophe. It's on the way. It is on the way. 2 degrees more. If the global temperatures rise 2 degrees more, there will be large areas of the world which will be too hot for people to live in. And you will have nearly 1 billion people in one form or another having to move. Now, I can't believe that the ruling classes don't know this. And the only way they're going to stop that is by mass massacres, by deterring people, by huge violence. And you can see we get conditioned to violence. You know, for the first 2 weeks of the Gaza genocide, which Israel are committing, I couldn't sleep. I literally couldn't sleep at night. Now I'm becoming conditioned to it. I see it on the TV. 200 Palestinians killed one day, 150 the next day. You just become conditioned to it. And I think that you may call me mad, people may call me mad, but I think that the world's on the brink. And I think that if we don't do something about global warming, about climate change, the working class will suffer massively. And that's what I've tried to do very clumsily, maybe in my book, to start a debate amongst working class people and say, look, the super rich, one way or another, will try to protect their interests wherever they go to. They've already started buying up properties in New Zealand and Australia, sort of fortified places in the desert. And you can check this out. The Guardian done an article on it. It's not just internet chat. And they can surround it with security guards and private security. Working class people can't do that. You know, they haven't got the funds. And if there are water shortages, if there are shortages of food, the working class are going to suffer most. So I think we need to get it through to our class. We have to return to class politics. We have to have an environmental strategy. The people that are reaping massive rewards and exploiting people all over the world have not got any interest in saving the environment because they think they're going to be okay anyway. We as workers do because we are the ones who are going to suffer the terrible consequences.
Yeah, I look at the global resistance against what's happening in Palestine. It's mainly the working class, mainly people who stand up for human rights and justice-minded people. They have been at the forefront of the struggle, the youth, the women, and the conscious elements throughout the world, because they realize that we are really on the brink of a big danger. It could even end up in World War III and the decimation of humanity, or the decimation of capitalism. One or the other may happen out of the way the struggle is developing. But how is it going to happen? So whom do we rely on? We rely on those elements who are fighting for the loyalty, for the interest of the working class. But when we look at Davos meeting in Switzerland, which recently occurred, who was there? It was a big multinational, big billionaires. And what is the agenda they were pushing for? They were supporting the war in Ukraine because out of the war industry, they make massive profits. They were supporting Israel as well. Instead of standing up for the Palestinian people, standing up against the murder and the genocide of innocent people in Gaza and Palestine, these were billionaires, along with the politicians who served them, whether it's Rishi Sunak or whether it's the American government or government of India, they all serve the interest of big multinational, big monopoly capitalists. They are their puppets and follow that agenda, which will maximize the profits for them. And these merchants of death don't care a hoot about who gets killed, whether it's the Jews or the Palestinians. So that struggle on an anti-imperialist basis, you could say, but behind is big monopoly capitalists. And as Steve said, within each country, the class struggle has to sharpen. And the workers demanding for their economic rights and for their political rights, job security, and against privatization. So the struggles are interlinked. The struggle against the capitalists within each country, as well as the struggle against these multinationals on a global scale. We are fighting the same enemy, which is system monopoly capitalism. And we have to sharpen these class struggles to end this kind of system. And only the working class and the peasantry and other oppressed sections throughout the world rising up together in a united manner can bring that about.
Kind of just reminds me of how the narrative that climate change people tend to put forward that, we're overpopulated and that's one of the reasons that climate change is occurring. They fail to mention, the industrial state and the capitalists that just keep exploiting the environment and not investing enough in green technology or green energy, or finding ways to save the environment instead. And I can just see that in the future they will make it justified to kill people that they don't want to serve based on overpopulation, and people will be okay with it because of the narrative they've been supporting this whole time.
Just
So
just on that, look,
yeah.
if the global north are the polluters, basically. The global north are the polluters. You can include China in that now, really, as well, because China are a big polluter. But we've got a choice, right? If the global south develops technology that the global north is currently using, then the climate change is only going to be exacerbated. It's going to be quicker. Now, I'm not suggesting the global south doesn't industrialize and doesn't modernize, but what that'll necessitate is either jumping over the stages of technology that are currently in use, or sharing the world's resources equally amongst all its nations. We can share that technology. We don't have to reinvent the telegram. We can jump straight to the mobile phone, if you like. That's the analogy. We can jump to cleaner power for the global south, so they can have a better lifestyle for the people there. But if we shared the world's resources, which I think it's absolute necessity now. Rosa Luxemburg said it's either socialism or barbarism. I think now we're at the stage it's either socialism or extinction. I really do think that those are our choices, and that's what I kind of try to say in the book. I mean, I'm trying to of course I'm trying to get people to buy the book, but I want this is not for me. I mean, I'm not going to get rich from this book. It's not going to happen. I just want people. They sort of people like me, working class people who are not like going to sit there and read an academic book. I just want to get the idea out there that we need to do something as a class, because we are just we're just sleepwalking into oblivion as a class.
Steve is saying that the system try to isolate anybody who militantly stands up for the working class interest. And Steve, through that book, has brought his experience, his struggles within the RMT. Now, we know that within the trade union movement, a lot of activists are sincere, they're genuine, and there may be some leaders who are good as well. Only the membership can decide who is a good leader or not. But
I'll be coming on to that just now.
Yeah, so there's a great need to stop this kind of marginalization, isolation of sincere activists, sincere militant fighters, and actually transform the whole situation the other way around. That the membership should bring forth those leaders who are sincere to their class interests, represent them, fight for them, set the agenda for them, and then they bring forth those leaders from those activists who've got a track record of fighting generally for the interest of the membership. And once they're brought forth, and those leaders should be accountable as well. I mean, you can't just bring forth leaders and then leave it in their hands. They've got to be accountable. And there should be mechanisms that they should be able to be replaced if they do not uphold the agenda of their membership.
Is going to ask you how we can hold them accountable. So from previous videos we've created in the BNA series, we've addressed that the trade union leaders can tend to be a large hindrance to trade unionism, and they often sell out and not uphold the demands of their trade union members, like you were just saying now. They receive pay wage packets from capitalists, which ultimately then have leverage on what the leaders say or do. So can the system be changed so that union members can easily replace the leaders or hold them accountable to upholding the demands of the overall trade union membership? So yes, they need to do that, but is it possible, the system that we have right now?
That I don't know. I think that when if the class moves in a big way, and we do get a lot more politicization and a lot more class consciousness, it might become possible. I'll tell you, when it dawned at me, it was like a bit of an epiphany, right? Because when you're in the middle of something and you're fighting away and you think you're fighting for socialism, you can get things can be obscured. You can see things differently. When I moved away from the RMT because many people in the leadership crossed the picket line, I sat back and I contemplated why we didn't break the anti-trade union laws despite all the rhetoric. And it wasn't really because the government had brought in these anti-union laws. There's a long tradition in the movement of actually breaking the law when it's necessary. It dawned on me that the leadership of the unions were the people who were stopping the workers breaking the anti-union laws. And they were doing that to protect their own high salaries and their expense accounts and their very privileged lifestyles. Because the worst came to the worst, if the union's assets were sequestrated, the workers could join another union, or the unions could just change its name, set up somewhere else. But the union leaders, they would lose all their privileges that they've accrued under capitalism. And that was like an epiphany to me. I hadn't seen that before, believe it or not. I'd read how trade union leaders had become corrupted, how they could become tools of capital, but I never thought that applied to my union. Somehow my union was different. And I bet there's thousands of people out there who know the theory, but actually when you see it in reality up close, that's when it sinks in about the aristocrats of labor and the pillars of capitalism and the trade union bureaucracy. They are different to workers. They don't go to work. They don't go out and do a 9 or 10 hour shift a day. They sit in meetings with management. They start to think like management. They start to see themselves as more important than the workers. Now, how can you remedy that? Perhaps far more direct control, direct democracy, being able to recall representatives, to be able to recall leaders without having to wait 5 years for a general secretary's election. Maybe that's what we need to start doing in trade unions, because we've got the latest, we have a ridiculous situation where trade union leader after trade union leader, after wasting 20, 30, 40 days of the member strike action, have settled for pay deals that are not even half the rate of inflation. What is that all about?
It's a waste of time.
Yeah, what Steve is saying is, I fully agree with him. But as you asked the question, can it be done? I believe it's a big challenge, it's a hard challenge, but it can be done. And how? If we fight the struggle in the sphere of working class democracy, as opposed to letting capitalist democracy being imposed on us. And what is the difference? In working class democracy, the membership should set the agenda. But the capitalist system has elite combination. They bring the aristocrat with an elite, serving them to serve their interest and maximize their profits. And when Steve said he was a bit surprised that they're all breaking anti-union laws, it is a surprise, but it's also expected. If you look at the whole history of the trade union movement, 1926 general strike, miners' strike, and our own experience, I was involved with the Gate Gourmet workers' struggle, we had a huge support for the Gate Gourmets, about 750 or something, some 20 workers there. And they were gaining support, but the system wanted to divide them. How did they divide them? By relying on the trade union leader, Tony Barber, I believe. And they had a separate meeting in Southall, in one of the centers there. And they quickly asked the Gate Gourmet workers, put their hands up, who agrees with this package? Didn't even give them time to look at the package, to see the pros and cons of it. And those didn't support the trade union agenda, the proposal of the leadership, were isolated, and they became the sacked Gate Gourmet workers. So they divided the workers. So they rely on dividing the workers. And who do they use? These trade union elite accommodation, who get privileges, high salaries, and then the Gate Gourmet workers had to continue, that sacked Gate Gourmet workers had to continue their struggle. So we have got the personal experience, and Steve had a similar experience in the RMT as well. So yes, we have to sharpen the struggle in the sphere of democracy to make sure that every working class organization, every working class political party serves the interest of that class. And I call it proletarian democracy, working class democracy. People should set the agenda, and they should select and elect candidates from the members themselves based on the track record, and hold them accountable and have mechanisms for recall. And it's those kind of mechanisms we need to do more work on. What kind of mechanisms? How can we bring it about that working class democracy becomes a dominant thing in working class organizations, and not have capitalist type of democracy imposed on the working class and holding them with the shackles of that flawed democracy.
This makes me question whether it's actually necessary to have an individual leader within trade unionism. If the whole collective were to have a voice and they were to put forward their ideologies based on true democracy, the majority would get what they want. By leaving it to one leader, it just it leaves the power in their hands. They're just like the political system, and clearly that isn't working for the working class. So why is it that the political system is leaking and bleeding into the trade union system, which is meant to be for the working class anyway?
I suppose we are in a system of representative so-called democracy, and in fact we're not at all. We're in a constitutional monarchy with 2/3 of our parliament are not elected, the monarch's not elected, and the House of Lords are not elected, and that sort of shapes the whole system of trade unions that we're in. You get the vote for somebody who's going to misrepresent you at every election, and you get this vote for, unfortunately, somebody who's going to represent you every 5 years in the General Secretary's election. And direct democracy to me is workers voting to walk out on strike. And of course, the trade union bureaucrats don't like that, because if the workers raise their hands and have that direct democracy in the workplace and walk off, then the trade union leaders are, first of all, afraid to lose their power, and secondly, afraid to lose their money and privileges for breaking the anti-trade union law. So they will then repudiate that action. They will legally send out a letter repudiating that action, so they can keep their privileges. So we need to actually start thinking back. I think the last heydays of the wildcat strikes were in the 70s, maybe the early 80s, and during the miners' strike, where people refused to be balloted. Ballots where a show of hands was good enough. And that's kind of as close as we came to direct democracy within our trade union movement. The whole movement is now controlled. In fact, the whole movement, I would argue now, is a shackle on workers taking action, as much as the anti-trade union laws are a shackle on the workers taking action. And I think we need to change that. We need to change the trade union movement, and we need a fresh set of ideas. We need to go back. We need to go back and look at our history and look at what we're about. Is it for individuals to walk about with privileges at the higher ranks of the organization and sell the workers short time after time? Or is it about actually achieving something collectively for the working class?
Yeah, I mean, I believe, Naprit, that we have to sharpen the struggle and bring forth leaders from the activists, as I mentioned. So that's one thing. And make sure the other thing is the economic struggle should be waged from the perspective of the working class, that they should never settle for anything below the inflation rates. They should keep abreast of the inflation rate in the economic parts of their struggles. And regarding political struggles, the working class should not accept anti-worker legislations. They should safeguard their security, fight for good working conditions, and in other words, build the trade union movement in a strong manner. I know within the framework of the capitalist system, and spearheading in the sphere of democracy, in the demanding economics to serve their interest, not the profitability of the capitalist class, and also even globally, that we support the anti-imperialist struggles against war, because that's a big profit motive for them, fight against racism. So we need to unite around a program, the interest of the working class. So it's that, because unity is not just because somebody is socialist, they unite, or left-wingers unite. Unity should be around a program that serves the interest of the working people, their demands against racism, against war, against privatization. So that building that unity around that and sharpening that struggle would put them in a stronger position to win their victories in the immediate level and pave the groundwork, you can say, for the creation of a new society.
Be the process in order to do that, or is that something we'll have to have?
I just think it's a return to direct democracy that we've already gone through. I think there needs to be a raising of revolutionary consciousness within trade unions. Class consciousness at the minute in this country is a very low ebb. I think that needs to be rebuilt. And we have to be honest with people. We have to tell people we see trade unions as a vehicle for achieving socialism. And we're not going to be bound by either the trade union bureaucrats or the laws that the capitalist class make and try to keep us in our place. We've got to be clear that we're about breaking them. And, you know, we gather a like-minded group around us and we go about doing it.
Mhm.
Not with all working class parties, whether they call themselves socialist parties or communist parties, it is their role and their duty to empower the working class. So, such that consciousness, what Steve is talking about, is their level of consciousness is raised. People fight for their interests and not watered down by, because often in the left wing, what happens is, say the elections are coming, and they'll say, oh, beat the Tories, defeat the Tories, and they'll make noise against the Labour Party. But when it comes to it, just start bringing the Labour Party back to power. That's the sort of thing we've got to avoid. So why not do what I believe what's happening in East London and West London to a small degree, but can happen to a larger degree, bring forth independent candidates from the activists who've got a track record of fighting for the class interest of the workers against war, against privatization, and against the anti-worker legislation. Unite around that program, bring forth those candidates, and instead of trade unions paying fees to the Labour Party, that money could be used to support their strikes. And decision making that can only be done if the decision making is in the hands of the membership, and they are have mechanism to make sure that their leaders serve them. So it's that kind of struggle we have to sharpen further.
So you've mentioned the Labour Party. So it directly goes into my next question. So an affiliated trade union is one that is linked to the Labour Party. I briefly read that unions tend to be donors to Labour Party for like their campaigns, and they can like give up to like millions of pounds. How helpful are the Labour Party to trade unionism? And how can trade unionists make a break from the Labour Party?
A complex question. First of all, trade unions are the biggest donors to the Labour Party. They're by and large their biggest funders. Big unions give millions of pounds per year to Labour one way or another. My union wasn't affiliated to the Labour Party, but it was Labourists. I mean, it after Bob Crow died, there was no attempt to form another working class party. So the Labour Party is a block on workers. They haven't repealed one anti-union law. In fact, they've kept them, and Blair boasted about being the most anti-trade union, having the most anti-trade union legislation in Europe. That was one of his boasts. And we've got to break from the Labour Party as a trade union movement. But look, let's look at things seriously. The working class isn't a homogenous group, right? We're all working class, but there are stratas within the working class. There are like C1s, if you like, skilled workers. And some of these people see themselves with having more in common with the middle class, maybe even earn more than middle class people if they're skilled workers. And then there are unskilled workers, and then they're unemployed workers. So the working class itself is divided, and these divisions are played out. And we're offered even within a bourgeois capitalist democracy, a liberal democracy like we've got in Britain, the first past the post system doesn't allow very easily for other parties to have any representation in Parliament. Even parties that get quite a big vote, like the Green Party, they get they don't get, they have one MP in first past the post system. If that was a proportional representation system, they would have a lot more. And that's deliberately done. So it's a two-horse race. And both horses are running for capitalism, like a repeat of the Iraq War. We see Keir Starmer and his Zionist friends in the Labour Party kind of cheerleading a genocide of the Palestinian people. 117 journalists have been killed in Palestine, over 150 United Nations workers, nearly 25,000 people now, most of them women and children. And we have a Labour Party in this country who are not even prepared to call for a ceasefire. Why would you give one penny of your money to those absolute murderers and scumbags? I think workers need to turn around now and stop doing it.
Absolutely. This is where the class analysis comes in, and that's what we're trying to do in our forum and discussion, to bring in the class analysis. The weapon used to colonize the whole world was elite accommodation. When they went to India, how did they conquer India? Those sections within the Indian population who sided with the colonists for accepting privileges, they were given land, the land was taken away, and our own very land was given to some traitors who actually collaborated with the colonists, and that gave rise to the conquest of India. And within each country, you find the same elite accommodation. And what is that elite accommodation? Aristocrat trade union leaders. Where if it's religious organization, you've got leaders within certain religious organizations who also support the capitalist system and their way of thinking and that kind of democracy. They use them. And so the capitalist system divides people on the basis of religion, on the basis of caste, and on the basis of, as Steve mentioned, there's sections within the working class who will be a bit better off, and especially in the more developed countries. And the capitalist system depends on them, you can say, to sustain itself. Whereas the real liberation can only come about if we cross those boundaries and unite on a class basis, whether you're a Sikh or a Muslim or a Christian or a trade unionist or a communist or socialist. We have one common interest, that is to fight against exploitation of working people in oppressed sections. And that is the kind of united front we need to build and overcome divisions within people and diversions. They try to divert it. Oh, you're fighting your separate struggle. This is the teacher struggle. This is the transport worker struggle. This is the anti-war struggle. Yes, those struggles specifically are important and have to be waged separately as well. But at the same time, we need to unify those struggles because they're the same against the same exploitative system. And the way it can be done is you get representatives from various struggles working together. You carry out your own struggles and also united struggles against a common exploitative capitalist system.
The one caveat I would put on that is in Britain and in a lot of Western countries, we still have this sort of imperialist leaning working class. They think back to Britain as a great power or see Britain as a great power in the future. And there is an element of racism in the working class. We can't get away from that. You know, we can see that the sort of support for amongst the working class Tories. Some people have working class labourers against asylum seekers. And we talk about diversions. What a massive diversion, even from their point of view, right? There's 750,000 people coming to Britain every year through the front door, immigrants coming in legally. But they point to about, at the most, 40,000 people coming across the channel illegally. It's a distraction. Even from their point of view, if you didn't want the immigrants, it's a distraction. Look at that. Don't look at all them coming over there. And of course, these immigrants, right, they have not robbed working people in this country. They have not let the deindustrialization of this country happen. They have not closed down the schools, not built council houses, let the NHS fall into disrepair. These immigrants haven't done anything of that. But people are willing to believe because they're a different colour or a different nationality, that somehow keeping these people out is going to make it a better place. And this is something we have to recognise. The British working class are imbued with imperialist ideology. And it's something we have to overcome, but we have to recognise it's there.
Yes, that's quite true that people are influenced by what I call it social backwardness. Yes, a lot of people will have be imbued by racism. They'll be imbued by caste discrimination. Therefore, victims. But that is a part of the whole capitalist strategy. If you look at the whole capitalist media, the education system, it nurtures that kind of social backwardness, divisions, and animosity between the population. So what do? We rely on the progressive section, the enlightened sections, and build those numbers in opposition to the social backwardness. But we have a non-antagonistic approach as far as people's conflicts are concerned. We try to unify them. When the capitalists try to make us fight each other, no, we don't. We just focus on fighting capitalism and recognize that it's this huge cultural onslaught. Look at the TV, barbarism, kill, destroy. They promote racism, they promote rude language. These are the huge challenges we faced, and that's why we're trying to build our own media. Everybody in a small way, our efforts are very small. What's necessary is very big efforts. To the working class has its own media that defends its interest, its own educational institutions defending interest, and it's a big challenge and for us. So we do recognize what Steve mentioned. Yes, there is social backwardness, but our approach is to increase awareness amongst the population and not be diverted, not be divided, but unified and focused our energies against the exploitative system.
Um, I feel, well, whenever people are struggling, they're always going to blame, I guess, the outsiders, because there's someone else to blame rather than actually pinning the real blame. And the reason why they are struggling is those that are in power. But then through media and through, cultural beliefs, they tend to, point to those that are also struggling, but probably struggling a little bit more. Yeah, one thing that is just like just scary to me, like punks, for example, a subculture. Punks, they're meant to be people that fight against oppression, fight for the working class. But there are periods in time where punks tend to be fascist as well and racist, and then like you have the skinheads. So it's no matter what kind of class you're in, there's always going to be that imperialist thought process, I suppose. And I guess, yes, it's our job to educate people that no, the real enemy is, I guess, the leaders who cause everyone's, struggle in the first place. So, Steve, based on the system that is in place now, how can we strengthen workers' democracy within the trade union movement to give them more power and autonomy?
I think it's about it's about taking sort of strike action. It's about building rank and file organizations within a union that can respond immediately to bosses' attacks and then go on the offensive. I think it's about ignoring the trade union bureaucracy, not being controlled by them, and if you like, operating like a union within a union and getting workers out on strike whenever they can. And I think that the Palestinian issue now, where we have trade unions in this country, GMB, Unite members making bombs and making technology which Israel uses, the RMT members in the Red Sea and the Royal Fleet Auxiliary, attacking one of the poorest nations on earth in Yemen, which the Yemenis are trying to put on sanctions on the Western powers and on Israel. We have sanctions everywhere else in the world. We had sanctions on Russia in minutes. There was emergency legislation to stop the Russian so-called bombing of the Ukraine, the attacks on the Ukraine. We can't do that for over 2 months on Israel. And when the Houthis try to apply sanctions by stopping the boats, we're attacking Yemen instead. And RMT members are actually facilitating that. What are the leaders doing about it, right? How can you have the absolute brass neck to stand in a stage in Trafalgar Square or outside Parliament and condemn what is happening in Palestine when you are not even prepared to tell your members who are supplying the Israelis with bombs, guns, weapons, technology, and physically sending ships out there in the Royal Fleet Auxiliary? How can you have a nerve to get up there and preach about having peace and ceasefire in Palestine when you're not prepared to ballot your members at least to take action to stop that? It's absolute hypocrisy.
I mean, only recently at Snaresbrook Crown Court, there was a struggle of the Albert 8, where they militantly took a stand that there should be no warships taking war materials to Israel. And Britain has a whole history of that. When the workers actually rebelled, they stopped. The dock workers went on strike, said that we're not going to send war materials to be used attacking working class people. That was during the time of the Soviet Union. And in this case, as Steve mentioned, the trade union leaders should be saying, no, we're not going to allow our workers to be used to send war materials or play any role in serving the oppression and exploitation of the Palestinian people. So it's quite an important point of what Stephen mentioned. So we distinguish between the workers. Majority of the militant workers are for what Steve said, but some sections of the trade union movement do what Steve has mentioned, and it's very, very disappointing. That situation has to be changed through replacement of those leaders by those who are loyal to the interest of working people, and that's the challenge that's facing us now.
Trade unions, they will probably be more assertive and more active trade unionists. How can we support them those that uphold the interests of the majority of their comrades within the trade union membership, compared to the leaders which, sell out?
Well, I don't think it's about changing the leadership. You see, I think it's about having a totally different structure. I think there is a role for leaders, but the leaders have to be accountable, and they've got to be directly accountable. As soon as a rep steps out of place, as soon as a leader steps out of place, there's got to be instant recall of those people. But the main thrust lays in the rank and file, and how you can support them, first of all, is by raising the demands. We've got to raise the demands. The movement's in such an absolute stupor that no one in the movement is even raising these demands anymore. Where is the demand for a strike for Palestine? Where is it? I mean, we've got millions of Muslims in this country. We've got millions of other people who are not Muslims who support Palestine. Many of them are in trade unions. Where is the call for let's have a one-day strike to start it off to get the ball rolling, just to raise the issue about Palestine? Let's do it. Where's that demand? It's not coming from anybody. We've got people up there wringing their hands and going, oh, it's terrible. It's all terrible. It's terrible. It's just really, really bad. Yeah, that's fine. We all know that. But what are you doing about it? Where's the demand for a strike?
Quite true. The membership, again, it's a consciousness. So we have to work hard, actually raising those demands, actually, as what Steve said. And that's to do with the consciousness that need to be raised within the membership as well. Yes, it's true that it's not just a question of changing leadership, it's creating those mechanisms within trade union, within working class organizations that can initiate what Steve said, demands. So workers should be able to initiate what kind of policy, what kind of stand those organizations should take, and compel the leaders to fulfill what their demands, and not serving the interest of the capitalist system itself. Basically, the decision making has to be in the hands of the membership.
If a worker was to suggest that they'd like to go on strike because of what's happening, do you think the system and the process of calling for strikes on the workers' side, would that be allowed? Do you think it would be enabled by the workers to call for a strike, or would it have to come from the leaders?
It would have to come from the organisation outside of the leadership. The leadership will not do it, so it'll have to come. If we've got plenty of people out there who are prepared to stand on stages, who are outside the trade union leadership, and wax lyrical about justice for Palestine. Let them get up and call for a general strike. Let them get up and call for a strike. Call for a strike of workers. Name a day. Give a couple of weeks to build for it, and ask workers to come out on strike for Palestine. I mean, why not do that? I mean, it's the least people can do. If workers don't follow the call, if there's no appetite for workers to do it at this time, at least we've raised the demands. At least we've raised the slogan, strike for Palestine. It'll be in people's minds. If more publicity we get, the better it will be. The more outrageous the demand, the more publicity it'll probably get, the more people will start to think about it.
Absolutely, Steve. It's also a reflection of the Westminster's obsolete democracy, where people vote, they don't get consulted, and they have no power to initiate legislation or policy that serves them. All that comes through the cabinet in the interest of the capitalists. Well, you're quite right. Therefore, there has to be a mechanism developed within those structures where people can raise demands. This we want, and that's what the leadership should do.
So, going forward, what kind of system should trade unionists help to create and fight for?
That we've got to be fighting for a socialist system, not just in this country, but a socialist system that encompasses the whole world. We've got a choice, right? We are one planet, and what happens in the north affects the south. What happens in the south affects the north. So the global south are getting the worst of the pollution now. They're suffering the consequences that the global north are doing. Now, if we want to go forward, we've got to find a way of living together and sharing the resources of this planet and planning. We've got to plan, and we've got to stop polluting the planet. We've got to look after the environment, because otherwise, we might be the last generation, or certainly our children might be the last generation of the human race will face climate catastrophe, and billions of people will probably die. So I think that we need to start really now We can't even do it on a national basis. We have to do it on a global basis, on an international basis. We need international socialism, and we need planning. We need industrial planning, and we need planning right across the planet.
Yep. Now, Preet, we have to change the system, and the capitalist system is the cause of the suffering of working class people and these wars and these climate crisis. So only a change of system. What kind of system is obviously a socialist system, and how is it going to come about? It's going to come about sharpening the immediate class struggle on a class analysis in each country as well as globally, because each country has their own specific circumstances, levels of struggle. So yes, every country, the workers, the oppressed section have to wage struggles within their own countries, as well as unite on a global basis against the monopoly capitalist system, which is responsible for causing the mess. And as Steve said, and I believe as well, we're on the brink of a third world war. And if we don't wage those struggles and succeed in those struggles, then it could lead to the decimation of humanity. But I'm confident that as we focus more and more and sharpen our struggles, it should lead to the end of capitalism and the creation of a new world, like socialist system, and bring liberation, freedom for all oppressed sections of society.
We want to obviously change the system. Is there a organization or like a bunch of organizations right now which could be the forefront of this change, or would there have to be a totally new organization which obviously encompasses those that are already trying to make change in order to push this forward?
I mean, look, we've got to work with what we've got. I mean, it would be wonderful if we had millions of activists out there who actually seen that this was a problem. Unfortunately, we don't. There's probably maybe 10,000 people in Britain that have got some revolutionary class consciousness and more around them who think they're revolutionary, but have really got just a welfare capitalist consciousness. But we've got to work together. Look, we haven't got the luxury, right, of creating a new generation of activists. Maybe the circumstances will do that as we go along, but we have to. Even if we can't agree exactly what we're for at the minute, we can agree what we're against. We're against capitalism. We're against climate change, and we need to start to be acting now. We need to start to raise awareness by taking direct action. I think somebody just Stop Oil people and what climate, well, I can't remember, the Insulate Britain and people like that taking that direct action have been marvelous in raising awareness. But we have to make those mass movements, and we've got to make them relevant to workers. We can't just let those activists be picked off because they are relatively small in number. We have to make working class people realize that this is their struggle, and that's what we're trying to do, I think. But we need everybody that's on our side now who think that they're fighting for the working class have to be involved in this struggle.
Yes, now, Preet, we got to unite the struggle of the students, of the women, of the doctors, of the workers, all sections of society. So they fight their specific battles immediately, as well as unite together in their common struggle against the system, and building through that united front for the immediate struggle and paving the way for the creation of a new society. It's a big challenge. And there are so many socialist parties, so many communist parties. Ultimately, you will have to have a communist party leading these struggles, but that will, the one that shows the correct direction at each stage, unites the working class, builds a united front, and brings about the correct fighting loyally for the class interest. And once such a communist party emerges as a leading party, ultimately that'll become the guiding force, you can say, for the working class. But ultimately, it's the workers who have to become the decision makers, the rulers. It's time the workers, the peasants, the oppressed section society, they were the decision makers, they were the rulers and masters of their own destiny.
This is a copy of my book. What I'm going to do, any money that I personally make from the book, I'm going to give 25% to medical aid for Palestinians. So this is a book to raise class consciousness. It's about international socialism. It's about a return to working class politics, and not identity politics. And I hope people will buy it and read it. You can get it on Amazon, Waterstones, wherever. And 25% of all the profit I made, I'll put it to help with the Palestinians.
Amazing, thank you. So the book launch again is on the 29th of January at Bookmarks Bookshop in London. Please order tickets and please order the book too. I'm really looking forward to reading the book. And thank you for the insights and the learnings from today.